Ah, all right. L'chaim, Chaver. Once you can just go back to Daf Lamed Ches just to read the last two lines. All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Peya, Pedig Dalet, Halacha Vav, and Zayin. Today we will be learning Daf Mem. Let's start on Daf Lamed Tes Amid Beis by the two dots, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid. The Gemara is going back to the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Ches. If you have a moment, turn back to Daf Lamed Ches Amid Aleph. The second din in the Mishnah is that Leket Shikhan Peya Shel Nachri Chayev B'Maiser. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2, Ella in Kain Hifkir. So a couple of steps. Step number 1. A goy is not obligated to keep the mitzvahs. When the Mishnah is speaking about a goy who gave Leket Shikhan Peya, we're talking about a goy who owns land in Eretz Yisrael, who grew product, who chose to give Leket Shikhan Peya. He gave it before the Meruach, just to make things simple. The goy bought everything that this goy left. He then went ahead and he did the meruach. The yid bought from the goy and did the meruach. Question is it chayv in meiser or not? Now, we already learned that Leket Shikhan Peya has a dispensation from Hashem, from the Oibishter, that it's completely exempt from meisers. The goy is not mechuyev to leave Leket Shikhan Peya. We view it as he gave it a gift to a nani. Very nice. A gift to a nani doesn't make it exempt. However, says the Mishnah, that's the meaning of Leket Shikhan Peya shall not be chayev b'maiser. But what happens? There's a bigger rule that if someone declares his produce ownerless, hefker means not only a gift to the poor, bein laniyim, bein la'ashirim, then there's a general dispensation that hefker is exempt from mice. So the Mishnah appears to be something very straightforward. However, it's not so straightforward. So let's review. We finished yesterday's shir quoting. This is both a Mishnah that we have in Yerushalmi Demai Perikei Halacha Ches. In the Bavli, this is a machlokes tanoim that we find on Gittin Bavli Daf Mem Zayin. Let me quote the machlokes the way we initially will understand it. And today in Yerushalmi Pei on today's daf, there's going to be a big chiddush how one Amoira completely understands this whole Mishnah differently. But before we get to the chiddush, let's go to the premise, to the base, and to the way this machlokes is understood both in the Bavli and in the beginning of our sugya today here in Yerushalmi Pei. What's the machlokes? The words are Yesh kinyan legoy be'eretz Yisrael lepatre min ha'maisres, or Ein kinyan legoy be'eretz Yisrael lepatre min ha'maisres. What does that mean? B'chlal, when it comes to achi of maisres, aside of the fact that only Yidden are mechuyev to separate maisres, the obligation of giving maisres, for example, doesn't go to products that grow here in Los Angeles, because it's connected to the product having a certain level of kedusha. Connected to Kedusha Eretz Yisrael, that's Mechayiv in Maises. If a goy owns land, let's go with the initial understanding of this machlokes. How much of an ownership does the goy have in the land? Meaning, if he mamish owns it, then it removes the level of Kedusha. If it removes the level of Kedusha, if the goy grow a product there, wheat, even if a Jew bought it before the Meruach and the Jew did the Meruach, it should still be exempt from ISIS, at least biblically. That's the meaning of Yesh Kinyan Lagoy Be'eretz Yisrael Lepatre Min HaMaisis. The fact that it was owned by a goy, even though now it doesn't belong to a goy anymore. It grew from land that belongs to a goy. It always is exempt from ISIS Midoirais. Who has that opinion? That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rav Shimon. Yesh kinyan legoy be'eretz Yisrael lekom lepatre min ha'maises. Rav Meir in contrast holds that ain't kinyan legoy be'eretz Yisrael lepatre min ha'maises. Of course, if the goy is the one that brought it to the Meruach, it will forever be exempt from maises. That's because by the critical moment, it didn't belong to a Jew. We already learned that here in Yerushalmi Peyah. But if the Meruach was done by a Yid, just because it grew in land that belongs to a Goy, of course the Goy would not have done it. The Goy is Patim and HaMitzvahs. But the product inherently is Mechuyev and connected to Kedushas Haaretz. Rav Meir versus Rabbi Yehuda Beis Rab Shimon. Now, when you read the Mishnah is saying two dinim. Din number one is that since leket shikchon of a goy is garnished, it's just a gift. Therefore, the Mishnah says clearly, if the Yid brings it to the Meruach, it's chayv and maises. Now, who does this Mishnah sound like? When we learned the Mishnah, he says, this Mishnah sounds like it's siding that with Shitas Rav Meir, right? That ain't king of Legoy be'eretz Yisrael, because if not, why would it be chayv? Really, we're going to see that there was a machlekes what Rabbi Yochanan said, and the first statement, the first shita, which is Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rabbi Chizkiah, the same Rabbi Yochanan, which we'll read again inside, actually says the opposite. Why will he say the opposite? Let's do this by heart. Because if a goy is mafkir something, that's this way of understanding what Rabbi Yochanan said. His koyach of being mafkirit is not strong enough to exempt it from ISIS. He doesn't own it enough to make it hefker. Hefker means something belongs to you. When you make it hefker, now it's completely ownerless. And the Torah says, hefker is exempt from ISIS.
How much ownership does he need? How much ownership does the goy need?
We're gonna word this more. This is the nuance of today. In other words, the Gemara is beginning. Rabbi Yochanan, whichever version of Rabbi Yochanan, is addressing what we will make into a contradiction, like mima nafshach. If the guy really owns, if he really owns it, then it should be exempt from ISIS. If the guy doesn't own it enough when he owns the land, he doesn't own it enough to exempt it from ISIS, then he doesn't own it enough to be mafkir it. So these two statements of the Mishnah contradict one the other. So we have to reconcile it. And now with that, I know that I want to give the rest of the intro, but this is mamash going to take us all the way to the end of Daf Mem Amud Aleph, understanding both versions of Rabbi Yochanan, and ultimately coming to a conclusion. And this is going to be mamash beautiful, how there might be a whole different way of understanding this machlokes tanoim, whether yesh king in Eretz Yisrael lepatrim in a ma'isres, ein king in Legoy lepatrim, a whole different understanding. Mamish. That will be Daf Mem. Daf Mem Amid Beis, with a Mazel Tov, we have been learning Peah from Daf Aleph until Daf Mem. Don't forget, guys, the whole Masechta is Daf Ayin Gimel. We're turning today over to a new parsha, to Leket. And it's fascinating. Like people who never learned Peah, it's also fascinating. We're going to define all of the details of Peah. What is Peah? What is Leket? I'm sorry, Leket. What is Leket? When is Leket? All these basic concepts that when you hear it for the first time, you learned that Rambam. So we heard it, that leket is only if it falls from within the hand, from within the sickle, not from the other side. We'll explain that. A borderline, machlokes tanoim, safek leket. We're going to learn leket. Safek leket is leket. We're going to learn a foundational machlokes between the Mishnah and a brisa. The brisa we already quoted before. In other words, we're going to start introducing the basic, simple. The first part of the daf today is going to be very nuanced. Okay, so with all that said, again, Chevra, daf lamed tes amid beis, by the two dots, 4 lines before the bottom of the amid. Version number 1 is Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rabbi Chizkiah b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. Our Mishnah, the sefer of the Mishnah that has in it these two dinim. Number 1, that leket shikchav goy is chayiv b'mais. Number 2, but if the goy was mafkided, it's patim and amaisres. And as we explained in our intro, it appears to contradict one the other. Like, which side does it go by? And if you miss the intro, doesn't matter how cup. Version number 1 is our Mishnah, not like Rav Meir. It goes like Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, and Rabbi Shimon, that say that the ownership of a goy in Eretz Yisrael, in the land, is so powerful that it's mafkia de kedusha. That's the way we're going to word it. Those products will never be chayv in maisres midoy raisa. The Mishnah says like a chick compare of a goy is chayv in maisres midrabanan. Has to be midrabanan. Midrabanan it's chayv. Why is Rabbi Yochanan insisting that the Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, and Rabbi Shimon? Why don't you just say it's Rav Meir? Rav Meir says that it's Chayv and Meiser. Because according to Rav Meir, the reason why product of a goy is Chayv and Meiser is because the Torah says, Kili kol ha'aretz. Kili ha'aretz. Li ha'aretz is God's and the Jewish people's. A goy never owns it, Keva. And therefore, here's the word. If he doesn't own it, it's not his to be mafker. And therefore, if he's mafker it, the Mishnah cannot conclude Elam Kain Hifkid. No, if a goy is mafker product, I know that the Eibishter says that if someone declares their product ownerless, hefker, it's exempt from ISIS. You have to own it to be mafker. The goy doesn't own it to be mafker enough. He doesn't own it enough. Therefore, come on, the Amar Yesh King in Legoy be'Eretz Yisrael apotram and amaisis, which means that the leka chik chompeya that the Mishnah says is chayv amaisis is taka only midrabanan. Why is he saying that? Because according to Rav Meir, who holds that ein kinyan Legoy be'Eretz Yisrael apotram and amaisis, then the Mishnah would not be able to make a statement that if you're mafkid, that's the last words in the Mishnah Daf Lamed Chesam and Daled, that Elam Kain Hifkid, it's potter. No, according to Rav Meir, Afilu Hifkido, you're going to be chayiv. The Torah says Kili ha'aretz. Kili ha'aretz means Kevan that it doesn't, and we're saying that the goy's ownership is not the goy's. If the goy's ownership is not mafkia min ha'maisnis, why? Because he doesn't really own it. Because if the goy would have owned it, it would have taken away the kedusha. If he doesn't own it, he can't be mafkid. That's slide number one. Other version, that's now we left off here yesterday, but we had to review it. Now comes Rabbi Yossi B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan. And here, let me use the words that we are familiar with when people went to yeshiva. There's kinyan haguf and there's kinyan mammon. Two different things. I inherently own this, and I own its value. Two different things. I know it sounds alike, but it's not alike. It's not alike. So therefore, we're going to now, the Rabbi Yossi understands that Rabbi Yechanan understood this whole topic, Yesh kinyan la'akum, ein kinyan la'akum. It's never about whether the goy owns the mumminess of the product. He owns it. Maisris has to do with Kedusha. Okay, so there's a machlokes whether he owns the essence of the land, and that would remove the Kedusha, whether he doesn't own the land itself, so he doesn't remove the Kedusha, but he certainly owns the financial value of the product. And therefore, Hefker is a din mumminus. And therefore, it's much better to make the Mishnah go according to Rav Meir. You don't have to say midrab midoy raisa. Rav Meir holds that ein kinyan legoy be'eretz Yisrael ein kinyan. It's chayv and meises. But the goy owns the mumminus. So if he's mafked, it's patim and ameises. Rabbi Yossi, B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan, no, don't forget that Rabbi Yechanan says that our Mishnah follows Rav Meir, who holds that ein kinyan legoy be'eretz Yisrael apotrim and ameises, which is why, yes, the leket shik chompei of a goy is chayiv midoy raisa, and on the other hand, if he's mafkid, it's completely pater. And this will be much better. Why will this be much better? Don't forget, we had an option. Why isn't it even an option to say the other way around, turning to the top of Daf Mem? Because according to Rabbi Yossi's version of Rabbi Yechanan, Bram, command Omer. Because if our Mishnah would be following the other three Tanoim, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon, that hold that Yesh Kinyan Legoy be'Eretz Yisrael Patrim and Amaisres. And therefore, one second. And therefore, what are we saying? That like a chikhov boy, when the Mishnah says Chai b'Maisres, it's only midrabanan. That doesn't make sense. Why doesn't that make sense? Because even though we'll agree that midrabanan, general product, even though it grew on the land of a goy, midrabanan is chayiv b'maisres. But if on top of that the goy left leket shikchon peya, doesn't make sense that the rabbanan would be machmer even there that it's chayiv b'maisres. That's the meaning of these words. Kal ekilo chachamim b'lekutim. The chachamim would have been. They are lenient when it comes to leket. Leket doesn't only mean the gleaning. Leket means leket shikchon peya. We get rabbinic law, but it's not din Torah. If it's inherently chayiv, it's always chayiv. But if you're moida, if the Mishnah would have followed the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon, that midoi raisa, nothing that grows on the land of a goy is chayiv and maisis. Nothing. Midrabanan it is. Doesn't make sense. If the Rabbanan would not have said that if the guy on top of that was kind and he gave like a chikhon peya. On that, even the Chachamim wouldn't have said chayiv b'peya. So therefore, that's why Rabbi Yossi, b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, rejects even the possibility for the Mishnah to follow Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon. Okay. And obviously, Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rabbi Chizkiah, they argue. They say, no, that midrabanan, you're always chayiv. So these are the two options. Now, the way the Gemara is going to, Gavaldik, come to a whole new understanding of the Mishnah over there, like we said in Gittin, Daf Mem Zayin, or here, Damai Pedikei Halacha Ches, is by beginning this topic, that Rabbi Lazar asked the question. And we don't even know on which version did he ask. And when we're going to go through the avoida of breaking of Yigiyah, of chapping, on whom did he ask, it's going to force us to come to a whole new understanding. Okay. Now, Rabbi Lazar asked against Rabbi Yochanan. We already learned in Brachas, in Yerushalmi. Rabbi Lazar was like a muvik of Rabbi Yochanan. So add the aleph. That's the way it goes. Lezer, that's Yiddish. You see, the Yerushalmi is Yiddishistan. Rabbi Lazar, Sha'al, the Ein Loi Kinyan, the Chasim. Now, you see, that's life. When someone makes a statement, you have to figure out what was the premise of the question. That's all we have. But the guy doesn't own Kinyan the Chasim. Kevin, you know what it sounds like initially? Kinyan the Chasim means Kinyan Mammon. In other words, this question of Rabbi Lazar, it sounds like it was based on, we want to know which version of Rabbi Yochanan did Rabbi Lazar have. That's what we're trying to do. And the Gemara is going to speak it out. It's beautiful. Oh, that lo al hada is amrat. That Rabbi Lazar's question doesn't fit initially the words. What, the guy doesn't own he doesn't own a monetary part of it? It doesn't sound like he's asking it on the latter version, what we introduced today, on Rabbi Yossi's version, b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. Because think about it, how would it even work? What's the Rabbi Yossi's version? Then you have to hold your head over here. Rabbi Yossi's version is that our Mishnah follows Rav Meir. We have over here in the bookshelves many, we have inside here. We have Rav Meir holds that ein kinyan l'goy be'eretz Yisrael l'patrim and amaisros, which would make the first part fit, which is that, the goy owned it, the goy sold it, gave it to a yid, even though he declared like a chik chopeya, that's nonsensical, he's not chayv and mitzvahs, and product of a goy, if the Jew brought it to the meruach, chayv and mitzvahs, ein kinyan l'goy be'eretz Yisrael l'patrim and amaisros, fits. Number two, if the goy was mafkeret, he was mafkeret. He doesn't have kedusha saguf. We said, but fakir, the Mishnah is because yesh like king in the chas. Oh, it's Rabbi Lazar's words don't make sense if Rabbi Lazar would have heard Rabbi Yochanan the way Rabbi Yossi heard it. The other way it works, mamish. The other way it works. That's what Kevin. That's what you were asking. Like, why would he not be able to be mafkeret? Ella alada. It sounds like Rabbi Lazar heard Rabbi Yochanan the way Rabbi Chizkiah and the way Rabbi Yirmiyah heard b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. Parenthetically, just to say that on the Flam Tesamid Beis, Rabbi Yirmiyah is mentioned first. You just see the Gersois is difficult. And here Rabbi Chizkiah is mentioned first. All of these things, you know how things work, Chavra? I don't want to get far off. Do you know that when the first big Gemara burning that happened in the Notre Dame, that was burned down and made burned down forever l'olam bod, after they invested the billions, that was the curse that the Chachamim put over there, is that there were certain of the Bali Tosfos that Pashut, they wrote the whole Gemara down from their minds. Mamish. They know the Goyim, they found all of the Gemaras and they burned it. This could be to happen with the Yerushalmi. I'm just saying these things. Rab Chizkiah, that's why it's hard. It's amazing. Anyway, it's coming back over here. So it goes on the first that Rab Chizkiah Rabbi Yochanan said that our Mishnah must follow Commander Amar, and that's Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon. Yesh kinyan l'goy be'eretz Yisrael patrim and amaisros. Bram. And why? Why did he say that? Let me tell you what's the shaila. The shaila is that why would they make the Mishnah go according to Rabbi Yisrael and Shimon when the Mishnah says that you're chayiv in meises? Only midrabanan. Why are they saying it? Because Rabbi Yochanan said that command the Amar ein king in the goy because if the Mishnah would have followed Rav Meir, that Rav Meir says the goy doesn't even own it enough to exempt it. Therefore, it's not going to fit the last statement in the Mishnah that if he was mafked at its potter, right, Kevin? And why not? What do you mean he doesn't own it? Epis, he owns it. You can't say it's legal. The guy bought it. The guy sold it. He owns it. So that's what Rabbi Lazar was asking about. The king in the chasim. So when we have to, we don't know what Rabbi Yochanan said. Rabbi Lazar was his master Talmud. Rabbi Lazar never quoted Rabbi Yochanan directly. We just have a kasha that he asked. So you put your head, and it sounds like Rabbi Lazar or Geher Rabbi Yochanan the way Rabbi Chizkiya and Rabbi Yirmiyah did. Says the Gemara, no, Nish. The Nish is brilliant. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Chanina b'shem Rabbi Pinchas. Now, whether you go to af, in other words, we're not rejecting that possibility. Could be, it fits. But the ba abed af al tinyanosa. Now again, that we have to be good as that. Tinyanosa means the latter one because we have in our Gemara first Yirmiyah and Chizkiya, and today we got with Rabbi Yosef. No, that even the way we learned until now could be that's what he asked. But even af al de Rabbi Yosef makshe. The what did Rabbi Yosef say? Rabbi Yochanan that our Mishnah dafko follows Rav Meir. Come on, the Amar ein king in Eretz Yisrael. King in the and why did Rabbi Yossi say that Rabbi Yochanan says the Mishnah follows Rav Meir? Because if our Mishnah would have been command the Amar Yesh King in the Goy wouldn't fit. What wouldn't fit? What did we explain? That if our Mishnah would be speaking about only midrabanan, it doesn't make sense that noch midrabanan. Like a chikhon peil will be chayiv. Ad kedei kach, we wouldn't say that, right? The way the words the Gemara says that kal hekilu chachamim bilikutim, they would have been lenient. When you have rabbinic law, the rabbinic law many times doesn't go all the way to the end. Adarabah, by Tumantara just came to my mind. What was that whole din? That if Mayim makes something back into a tchila, so if Mayim touches a keli from the outside, only the outside of the keli is tummy. No, the Chachamim many times they don't go all the way to the end to remember it's a the midrabanan. So first of all, let's go with this now. Let's go that Rabbi Yossi had it right, and I'm going to show you. Says now this is Gavaldik how the words of Rabbi Lazar, his kasha, the Eloy king and the Chasim will fit. Alei Rabbi Lazar shal, and on this Rabbi Lazar come in asking the Eloy king and the Chasim. Everyone agrees that he has full king and mum. And now let me tell you, now you have to go figure what this means. And you look in the nice kalim, and let me do my best. I mean, they did the hard work. I just got to say it in English. L'chaim. So let's go like this. The only way these words would make sense, whoever came now, you're perfect. We have a Mishnah in Gittin, and that's also quoted in Yerushalmi Damai. What are they talking about? A goy can legally own land in Eretz Yisrael. It's a fact. He can buy it. He can sell it. Do we advocate selling land to a goy? No, we don't. But he could own it. What happens if a goy owns land on it produce grew? Now again, if the goy grew it and he made it until the packaging, it's always going to be exempt from ISIS. Because when the critical moment of shlish and miruach was biyad goy, doesn't matter if a Jew brought it late. No one debates. The question is, what happens if a Jew brought it early in the stage? Whether he brought the land and the produce, whether he just brought the produce, and the Yid brought it to the Gemar Malach. So it sounds like, so what do they say? That, what's the issue? The issue is like this. Why isn't produce from LA Chayv and Mises? Why not? Because it lacks Kedusha. That's the correct way of wording it. There's no Kedusha Asaretz here. Of course, the whole world is God's, but it's Chulin. Chulin is not bad, but it's not holy. Shabbos is holy. Weekday is not. Eretz Yisrael is Eretz HaKodesh. LA is not Eretz HaKodesh. Listen to these words. If a goy owns land, so there's different levels of ownership. If he only owns it on a more external level, then his ownership will not remove the kedusha. If he owns it, it removes the kedusha. If it removes the kedusha, it should never be chayv and meises. Now, when you read the Mishnah, so that sounds like the words. So Rabbi Meir Reimer, that ein kinyan legoy be'eretz Yisrael l'patrem and amaisus. We understand that to mean he doesn't own it. Let's only kedusha, only mammon. And now, if a yid buys it, it's chayv and meises. But Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon saying, no, yesh kinyan legoy be'eretz Yisrael l'patrem and amaisus. Suggesting Gemara, maybe that's not the machlokes. Maybe everyone agrees that when the goy owned the land, everyone agrees. The produce that grew from his land will always biblically be exempt from ISIS. Everyone agrees to that. So what are they arguing about? They're arguing about what happens if after the goy owns the land, if he sold the land to another Jew. What happens in the future? The new product that grew from the land. Do we say that now a Yid owns it? Now that's Rav Meir. Ain't king in Legoy for the future land. The produce that grew, everyone agrees. Everyone agrees it's exempt from ISIS.
But at some point, all the land was owned by non-Jews.
You got a problem. And let me say the words like this. First, that's not true. That's what the Goyim want us to think. So he got into all of us. No. Oh, so how it goes? When we conquered the land, kibush, the kibush of Yeshua invested in the land kedusha. And when a goy buys it, if his ownership, that's what we're saying, his ownership is so strong, it's not holy. But now we sold it to a Jew. So we're going to view, that's the machloikas of these. We might view the ownership of the new Jew as kibush yachid. Kibush yachid, lav shemei kibush. You cannot reinvest it with kedusha. And if that would be the case,
I'm sorry, Rabbi. Why can't you invest kedusha in it after a goy owned it?
Because that's what we're saying.
No, I'm saying, but what is the reason?
One is okay. Let's go like this. There's different levels of ownership. We're going now that everyone agrees that when he owns it fully.
Got it.
And when he owns it fully, the fact that it's now belonging to a non-Jew, the kedusha is removed. Everyone agrees to that, and that product will always be exempt.
But ownership was transferred.
Now, if a Jew, so what are they arguing about? What happens if a Jew buys it later? What happens to the new product? That's the machlokes. Rav Meir holds that now it's imbued with kedusha. Ain't king in legoy lepatre forever. The Rabbi Yehuda is Shimon hold. No, if a goy buys it in the future, if a Jew buys it in the future, he cannot reinvest it with that level of kedusha.
That's the question. Why? According to Rabbi Yossi,
because it's invested with kedusha through conquest, and buying something is not conquering it. It's that we have to get rid of all of these goyish thoughts. So today, thinking, you'll be nice, you'll go there and you'll buy the land.
Well, then the question is, who owned it before the goy?
The Jewish people through the conquest of Yeshua.
So therefore, it goes back to the Jews.
There's a certain type of ownership that has to be made by conquest. And if we don't have conquest, not by an individual, that also doesn't count. A communal conquest, and me buying a land is not communal conquest.
No, what I'm saying is, before the goy bought it, the Jews had conquested it.
That's right.
Therefore, after the Jew gets it, it goes back to the initial condition of the
so
Jews
that's the machlokes. So we're saying that's the machlokes. All the point is that according to this understanding of that machlokes, everyone will agree that the product that the Mishnah is speaking about only has to be tithed midrabanan. And therefore, why are you insisting that our Mishnah goes only according to one side or the other? That was the question of Rabbi Lazar. The Mishnah goes according to everyone, and it has to work according to everyone. If it belonged to a guy, only midrabanan. On the other hand, if the Jew is mafkid it, if the guy was mafkid it, the guy owns it enough to be mafkid it. In other words, he was asking on his teacher, why are you making the Mishnah side with one when the Mishnah will side with both? Because they were never even speaking about the current product. Their whole argument was only on future selling of the land. That's the way we're going to learn the Gemara. Bottom line is that we have two ways of understanding what Rabbi Yochanan said, and we cannot extrapolate from his student Rabbi Lazar's kasha which version he had, because his kasha fits according to both versions. We'll leave it at that. This is Gavaldik. And now we're, guys, new. Daf Mem Amid Beis. And it's mamish like a new Masechta now. Even though the Masechta is called Peya, the Torah juxtaposes Leket, Shikha, and Peya. So here, the Masadid put together Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and so the Mishnayos and the Gemara, they put them together. By the way, the Rambam also puts them together, but the Rambam doesn't put it under the header of Peya. You know, there isn't Hilchos Peya. There is Hilchos Matnos Aniyim. That's the Rambam say that. The Rabbi called it Peya, but in Peya includes Leket, Shikha, Peya. So we spoke a lot about Peya, now we'll speak about Leket. Now, the pasuk in Leket is together with Peya. It's a pasuk in Kedoshim and in other places. It says, "Ubekutzechem esketzir artzechem lo yisechal pa'asot choliktzor." That's all Peya. Then it says, "The Leket ketzircha lo yisalakit." The Leket ketzircha, the gleanings. I know the word in English means nothing. To me, also means nothing. Well, you have to say the gleanings of your harvest don't gather. What's it does? Says the Mishnah. What's leket? Taich leket. Hanoisher, something that falls while you're reaping. Now, let me just say like this: how do people reap? We have to have a lesson because we buy our product in the supermarket. You're going to grab in one hand a bunch of stalks. Whether you bundled it, which is what most people did, or not, is not relevant for this. Most people, like I mentioned, they would tie it before they would cut it, because then you have to go chasing after it. Nishnageya at all. In one hand, you grab a bunch of stalks, and with the other hand, you have a utensil. We're going to call it a sickle, a magol, which is a rounded knife, and with a swoosh, you give a knock off, you cut off that which you have in your hand. The moment of Ketzira begins from when you grab it in your hand, not only when you cut it. After you cut it, you put it down. The Ketzira begins from when you grab it in your hand until when you mindfully put it on the ground. That's the Shas Ketzira. During that time, if either one or two, not three or more, one or two stalks fall out of your hand, they're noisher. You have to be mindful of that. In other words, when it happens, if you're not going to pay attention, you're going to miss it, because you're going to put the bundle. That is not yours. That belongs to the other. Our Mishnah, unlike a Braisa, which the Braisa was quoted before, holds, what we described is the normal way that people would harvest. The abnormal way would be you grab a bundle with your hand, you don't have a utensil, you rip it out. Grab, rip it out. Say that. If you're, same thing, our Mishnah holds. B'shas Ketzira would means from when you grab it, it's grabbing, plucking, placing. Once you placed it, all of them are on the ground. The pshat of leket means is that b'shas Ketzira, like we said, from when you grab it until when you placed it, to inadvertently they fell out of your hand. Okay. Ezo leket anoisha b'shas Ketzira. Ho yo koitzer. If one was reaping, and whether he's cutting with a sickle, like we said, he's cutting with the knife that which the other hand has filled, or our Mishnah holds, you don't have a utensil. So you grab it, and the same hand that grabs a kamitza, you grabbed a fistful, you plucked it out. If any, from when you grab until when you place, if one or two ears of grain fall from your hand, they fall out of the sickle on the ground, that's called leket. Now, the Mishnah goes another detail. What happens if there's a reason why it fell out of your hand? There's some external factor that caused it to fall. The example would be, he koitz the nafal miyadei. While you're doing the ketzira, like we mentioned, from when you grabbed it until when you placed it on the ground, as an example, a thorn stuck into your hand. A bee bit you. And because of that, you removed your grasp, And only, listen, if more than 2 fell, anyways, it's not leket. But what caused 1 or 2 to fall was something external, says the Mishnah, Hareze shel bal habayis. That's a big, important rule. Okay? In other words, it fell on the ground because of an external factor. That's not called leket. Another detail. What is leket? Toy chayad v'toy chamagol. The Gemara is going to go into more details. Let me just say what it means. What's toy hamagol? Let me tell you what that means. When you grab it, what happens, guys? If instead of you cutting with a sickle everything that's in your hand, you stick the sickle in the middle and you cut part. You didn't cut the whole thing. So some of that bundle, see, the sickle is a semicircular blade. Some of it is within the blade. The other is out. Now, in most cases, that which is out should remain attached. That's for sure not like it. But even if it got detached from the other side of the sickle, and that fell, that's called, has to be b'toy chamago, and not outside. Same thing b'toy chayad. When I grab something, the normal way of harvesting is that when I cut it with a sickle, what did I cut? Only that which is within my grasp. What happens if I make a bigger swing? So when I made a bigger swing, not only did I cut off everything in my fist, but the neighboring stalks from here, from there, got cut off, even though I was not grasping it. That's called not within your hand. Leket is only if that which fell from within the sickle and from within your hand. That's the next thing in the Mishnah. Toy chayad, the end. V'toy chamago, that is laniyah. Acharayad, which means you cut something that was not in your grasp. Acharayad is not shaykh when you pluck. If you're not plucking, it's not shaykh. By plucking, you only pluck what's in your hand. But when you cut, you can cut more. Or v'achar mago, that which is beyond the sickle, because you made, instead of cutting, you stuck it in the middle and then you cut from the middle. So then there's the other half. There's the part that's on the other side of the semicircular knife. That belongs to the balabayis, not to the ani. What happens if it's borderline? Borderline means roy shayad v'roy shamago. Not this side of the sickle, not the inner, not the outer, the tip. When you grasp, what happens if it's not on the other side of the hand, but it's not within your hand, your fingertips are touching it. They say with fingertips and palm, fingertips, not inside your hand, it's the tips. Borderline. Machlekes tanoim. I know the word borderline is a very popular word today. That person is borderline. So Rabbi Shmuel says, Laniyim. And Rabbi Akiva holds, Labalabayis. And we're going to get this much more, God willing, when, in other words, Rabbi Shmuel holds borderline is within. Rabbi Akiva holds borderline is without. Let's go tzaddik and Baal Tshuva. In other words, the tzaddik, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, everyone, you borderline, you're included. If you have that mindset, how are you going to do tshuva? You have to appreciate that. If a person has the mindset of the tzaddik and they're not a tzaddik, they'll never do tshuva. No, forget. A borderline person will do tshuva when he says, I'm not in, I want to be in. Fits. Now, the final din of the Mishnah is what we will call suffix leket leket. Now, as an example, what will be a suffix leket? So let's go also. This I know from Brazil. There's a lot of ant holes. And a lot of ant, we're not speaking about an ant mountain. That's another type. Ant holes. So what happens like this is that when there's standing rain, if there's an ant hole under the area of standing rain, the ants are hungry. They krich out, they chop, they bring it in the ant hole. What happens if you already harvested the field? You already harvested the field. And then the ants took some of the kernels in the ant hole. That's a suffix. What will be the suffix? Because whenever you harvest, the majority will be yours, but some will be leket. Leket happens. Could be the ants took from the leket. You would not know whether they took from the leket, whether they took from the shabalabais. You'll have that down. If you can establish that all of what the ants took was from before you cut it, there is no leket. So that's what the Mishnah is saying. That ants holes that are right now, right above the ant hole, what do you have? You have standing grain. It makes sense, guys, that if you find grain in the ant hole, they took it from the standing grain. There's no suffix here. So everyone will hold that is a Shabbat Labayis. We're building up to the next case. You already harvested. There's already a harvest. When you found it in the ant hole, now this product, now guys, just because this product in the ground, could be the ants took it when it was still standing. And even if they took it from that which is on the ground, who says they took it from the leket? I know it's a suffix. So the Gemara is going to expound more, but let's get the words. You go in the ant hole and you divide the ant hole into the higher part of the ant hole and the lower part of the ant hole. Guys, which kernels came into the ant? The ones that are on the bottom came from when? Came from earlier. So the ones that are in the bottom, we're going to say the ants took it when it was still standing. Vaday not like it. You understand? But the top ones, not because we know that the top kernels, the kernels that are in the top of the ant hole came from leket. We do not know that. What we do know is it came from a harvested product. It's fresh. They just put today in the fridge. They just brought it in there. Right now, it's already cut. Now, what's cut? Some of it is Shabbat Labayis, a little bit is leket, but maybe they took it from the leket. That suffix is enough, l'kula alma, to say suffix leket, leket. That's the pshat. That all yoinim, laniyim, tachtoinim, Shabbat Labayis. Rav Meir says more. Rav Meir says, however, we'll define the elyonim and the tachtoinim, we'll leave that tomorrow, that hakoy laniyim. Because you know what? What you're telling me that, is it not possible? It's already harvested. Maybe the ants, David, had an empty ant hole, and today they went out with all of the army, and they brought in all the kernels they need from the already harvested. From the already harvested, could be they took it from the leket. Some from the leket, we don't know. But the rule is, shesafik leket leket. Now, externally, it sounds like Rav Meir is chayish l'meyuta. Sounds like this. So therefore, he doesn't differentiate el yonim v'tachtoinim. But the Tanakama holds, no, the Tachtoinim came from yesterday. It's already in the bottom. It's here for a while. We can already presume it came from the standing grain, which is Vaday not like it. Let's leave it at that, and let's at least open up. There's one thing.
Sorry, how much product are we talking about in an anthole to be worthy of wondering who gets it?
One kernel.
So it's...
Yes, Kevan.
Isn't it negligible?
No, we don't. That approach we cannot have when we come to Torah. Ever, mamash. And I'll tell you even more than that. It's interesting when it comes to financial law, right? We say that din pruta kidin meya, but it has to be a pruta. Here it's not about a pruta. It's not about the value. It's about the mitzvah. You know what? That's a beautiful observation. So you can have now 100 daf of Gemara. It could have been. They made it smaller. Speaking about one kernel, doesn't matter.
Got it.
All right. Now, says the Gemara Tani, we learned in a Braisa, when it says, we quoted the pasuk in Kedoshim, the leket ketzircha. Now, the word ketzir literally means with a kelim. The word ketzira, uprooting, we don't have that word. So since the Torah says ketzircha, so the Gemara says the Braisa, not like the Mishnah, the Braisa argues, the Mishnah Befeder said, that tolash, it's called talisha, tolash mole kumsoi, it's included in the din of, no, the Braisa doesn't hold of that. And not only does the Braisa argue when it comes to leket, but let's go with the Rashirilio, since the Torah juxtaposes leket and peret. Now, again, just to speak general, when you are harvesting clusters of grape, if one or two grapes fall off the cluster, we're not talking about oilelois. We're talking about peret. Peret's a prat. Is when you're harvesting the grapes, you chop off a cluster. When you're harvesting the cluster, if one or two grapes fall on the ground, the Torah also, that's called peret karmacha. Now, the Torah doesn't use the word skitzira there. The Braisa that argues with the Mishnah doesn't only argue by leket because it says kitzira. even by peret, and by peret we don't have the word katsira, since the Torah juxtaposes in a pasuk the mitzvah of leket and the mitzvah of peret. The Braisa extends the limitation. Leket is only with the sickle. Same thing. That peret karmacham. Only when you are harvesting the clusters the way most people do, which is with a utensil, and we'll stop over here. In other words, we're just acknowledging that there is a machlokes between the Braisa and the Mishnah, whether the mitzvah of leket goes always, even by Talisha, or like the Braisa, dafka not. Now, Lukula Alma, just to conclude with that, we had this, I forgot on what that base could be in the beginning. Lukula Alma Peya, doesn't matter how you do. The obligation of Peya, we learned, is Sai Bekeli, whether you're plucking, whether you're oiked, always. When it comes to leket, we have now a machlokes tanoim to be